Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Dark Art Society podcast. I'm your host, Chet Zar. And I got a great episode coming up for you today. Just finished an amazing interview with Adi Granov. You may know him from the Tool posters or the Tool packaging he did for the Opiate re-release, or his work on the Iron Man movies. But those may be the least interesting things about him, believe it or not. He's got quite a life story and really a brilliant artist. So it's awesome to have him on the show. We had a great conversation. Super nice guy, too. Really enjoyed talking with him. So that's coming up. It's an excellent episode. What have I been up to? I've been up to shipping books. It's tedious as hell. It's a nightmare. The nightmare never ends. But I am getting them done. And I'm gonna have also got the dystopia Ouija boards almost done. Going to pick up the samples tomorrow and approve them, and then we'll get those milled out, and those will be ready to ship. So things are happening. Things are getting shipped. So that's really a relief. I'm also still working on this NFT stuff. I'm gonna keep myself from talking about it all the time. And I've already failed at that, because here I am talking about it. But I have to say, the more I get involved, the more I'm in that space, the more I realize that the NFT haters really are wrong. It's like it's not like I become more and more like wondering, am I in the right place? Is this for real? It's like the more you're in it, the more you realize it's misunderstood completely. So I'm super excited about it. I've been animating an old painting, Siamese clowns, just to kind of get my feet back into it and relearn After Effects, because I was a After Effects freak for a long time when I did the normal stuff, and been wanting to animate paintings for years now. And so it's kind of cool to have a reason to do it. Really fun. Other than that, working on commissions, still got commissions to do. Got a really cool big ass Phoenix commission I'm going to do for Chris Velasco that I've owed him for 5 years now. Finally getting that taken care of. I got some others that I've owed for a long time that I'm dealing with. So that's my life. Busy every day. I'm hoping that this year, I know I said this last year, but this year is really, things are happening. I'm hoping that this year all the book stuff will be done. I know I said this last year, but this time I'm shipping stuff. The Ouija board's almost done. So, as things actually get shipped out, it becomes a lot easier to deal with. And of course, once I get the shipping, at least the majority of the Kickstarter shipping done on the book, I'm going to offer it for pre-sale, because people keep hitting me up to buy one. And I don't want to. I can't send any out, though. I can take pre-orders, but I can't send any out until the Kickstarter people have theirs. That would just be wrong. So those, once I get a certain amount out, more than 62 or so that I've gotten out, I think there's 600 that need to ship. So I'm a tenth of the way through it. Once more of those are out and I feel comfortable in the flow of everything, I will offer the book to the public for pre-order sales. And yeah, I mean, you can get one if you want. What else? Oh, I'm having a sale that ends Friday. What is it? If you chetzar.bigcartel.com, I've got some new resin casts up. I put some band signed Tool San Jose posters, but those sold out really fast. I put 5 up and those are gone. but I got resin casts, and everything in the store is 10% off if you use the code Valentine's 2022, because I posted it on Valentine's Day, but then I didn't get it ready until like 4:00. So I thought, I'm just going to have it go throughout the week. So you can get 10% off your order if you use that code when you check out. And is that it? I think that's it. Oh, I'm going to be adding stuff, I think, throughout the week too. Okay. Let's get to the Patreon subscribers. So if you want to support the podcast, you could join at patreon.com/darkartsociety for as little as $1. And I think at the $3 and up level, you get entrance to the Discord server, which is really starting to happen again. But for only $1, you can get in the Facebook group, which is a great group if you're on Facebook, the private Facebook group. And yeah, here are, and you can get your name read on the podcast. And here are some of those names from this week who have supported the podcast and are donating to our Patreon. Okay. Where did we leave off? Son of a bitch. I had this all ready to go and I messed it up. First, I have to go into my messages, and then I have to find Randall Perkins. Picasso the Mundane is his name on here. And he every week he's so kind. He knows I have it. I have too much on my plate. He always, without fail, he tells me who the last name I read off on the previous podcast. And he just does this because he's a cool guy. What a nice guy. I appreciate you, Randall. Okay, so last person I left off with was Nick Stiles. So new subscribers. Charlene Brinson. Thank you, Charlene. Oh, Clint Carney. Clint, thank you. And congratulations. Clint Carney won Christopher Ulrich's first NFT release. And he got it at a good price too. That thing's going to be worth a lot of money. That was really cool of you, Clint. We appreciate that. Okay. And then we've got Brian Wilson, who just messaged me and asked for the Discord link, and I just gave it to him. And Ken Jeremiahson upgraded his pledge to get into Discord, and I just messaged him too. So that's it. Oh yeah, you get the podcast a day early, and you get the video podcast like weeks early if you join the Patreon, and you're supporting a good cause because we are promoting dark artists and the dark art scene and interviewing amazing artists on here. So your support makes it happen. And I'm truly grateful for that. So thank you. Thank you for everyone who supports it. All right. Enough of my blathering. Let's get on with it. Here we go. Adi Granov. What's up, Adi?
Hello.
Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, man.
My pleasure.
Yeah. You know, you don't need me to tell you how amazing your work is, but absolutely love it. I was knowingly exposed to it through the Tool posters. And then I, found out your background and realized I'd been seeing your work for a lot longer than that. I think the shop I worked at was even trying to get one of the Iron Man gigs. The shop I worked at, Spectral Motion. I know we did some kind of like maquette, an Iron Man maquette.
Possible, yeah.
Yeah, it's been so long ago. I don't remember any of that.
Yeah, I'm never really involved in any of that stuff, so I don't know. But
yeah. Anyway, so it's like our paths have probably crossed at an earlier time, both working in the film industry and stuff. But
I think in general, just in the art world, it's a pretty small world actually. Sooner or later, it seems like everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that in effects too, and in visual effects, I think, as well. But I think the art world's even smaller because fewer people are doing it.
Yeah,
because the money sucks in the fine art world anyway.
and I think also social media. I just realized, like it's kind of, it's not even really like 7 degrees of separation or whatever it's called. It's now like 2 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
It's usually someone I know will know someone else that will know someone else, and it just seems to be all connected.
It is. It's kind of amazing. So you've had a well. How did you get involved working with Adam from Tool?
Actually, Facebook.
There you go.
Yeah, I've been a fan of Tool for a very long time, and actually inadvertently fan of your work for a very long time.
Oh, thanks.
But yeah, more to the point, I think it was about 10 years ago now, maybe 11. I realized that he had a Facebook, and I sent him a friend request. Just I'm not really expecting anything, but he actually messaged me within like a couple of minutes to say he loved my work.
Oh, wow.
And he asked me if I was going to Comic-Con in San Diego that year, and I said I wasn't planning on, but he said, "Oh, if you are, you should come and visit." I was like, "Okay, I'll go."
That's a good reason to go.
Yeah, so I went to Comic-Con, and then afterwards went and stayed with him, and that's how I met him.
Cool.
And yeah, so that's kind of how it started.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, so poor Adam's going to get all these all these emails, all these messages now from artists who want to do tool posters. I've been hit up with so many people, artists, trying to get me to send their stuff to Adam.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I assume so. And it's like you can't do it because if you do one, you have to do them all, so you can't. At least that was how I approached it. It's like I can't do that every time someone hits me up. It's like it's gonna piss Adam off, No,
I did it a couple of times with people I knew, and it sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, and I've kind of stopped doing it because it kind of puts a bit. I feel responsible,
right?
And if it works out, it's great, but if it doesn't, then I feel like I've done something wrong, even though I haven't really. But I try to avoid having that, responsibility on me.
Right.
It's not just with Adam. It's with work in general. With like the movie stuff, and it becomes a bit of a, I don't know, when personal and work gets tangled up, it can be,
Yes, I know. I definitely know that. I've actually recommended a couple people to him. I do from time to time. I see people. I'm like, this person would do an amazing poster, but it's never people that are kind of like asking me, because I just I can't. If like I said, if someone asks me one time and I send it, then it's like I'll have to do it every time if I'm going to be fair. But one person, I will remain nameless, ended up getting a poster. And I don't even think he knows that I recommended him for it. I don't want to be a dick and be like, hey, I probably got you this gig. So I'm just like, let it be and be happy for him.
I mean, the thing is, Adam is such a big fan of art, and because of course before COVID, but he came to Comic-Con a couple of times, and we'd hang out, and I'd introduce him to different people, and then and actually he introduced me to a few people as well, because he knows a lot more people in the kind of the fine art side, and then a lot of the more kind of commercial artists and comic book artists and stuff I know. So I know that there were like connections made, but like I said, I've recommended people in the past, and in some cases it worked out, in some it didn't. So I've kind of decided to. I mean, I'm not saying no ever, but It's just it's a bit of a, to me at least, it's a bit of a sensitive subject.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, sorry for bringing it up.
No, it's fine. No, it's actually something I've been thinking about a lot. Because actually, one of my good friends, Peach Momoko from Japan, she's a comic book artist, and my wife really loved her work, and we met her in Tokyo, I don't know, a number of years ago. And then another time we were again in Tokyo, and the editor-in-chief from Marvel was there, so I introduced him, and now she's become a really big Marvel star.
Awesome.
And then I noticed that Adam was following her on Instagram, and she just did a poster.
Oh wow, that's cool.
And, yeah, I had nothing to do with that. It's
right.
just that I was really, really quite like proud that, like, you know, it's kind of my two different worlds came together.
Yeah.
Nice way.
It's so cool to be able to do that. One thing about Adam, he's got really great taste in art. It's like he really has great taste. He's one of these people that you ever know a person that knows all of the cool bands before you do, and like introduces you to all the cool bands. Have you ever? Because I had a friend like that in high school. He knew all of the cool bands way before I did, and he would always introduce me to them early, and then they would become really big. And Adam's like that, with at least with me, with aside from music, he's turned me on to a lot of bands that I'd never heard of, but with art, like he's the first person to turn me on to Beksinski, who's like one of my favorite artists now.
Yeah.
And he's done that a lot. He's like one of those people that knows what's cool before people kind of know about it. Some people have a talent for that.
I both, yeah, I agree, but I also he has some, and he knows this, he has some really ugly art. I'm like, oh God, this is just hideous. But he does have some really amazing
really
art.
I haven't seen any of the ugly stuff. It's been a while since I've seen it.
He has, yeah, he has some stuff. I mean, I can see the kind of the appeal from like a kitsch kind of, you know, ironic cool,
right? Yeah,
pretty ugly. But then, you know, he has, you know, one of my favorite painters, Phil Hale. He has.
Oh, I know. It's so crazy to see those in person.
Yeah. Actually, one of the craziest experiences to me, we were staying with Adam in Malibu at the time, and Phil Hale came to stay, and we spent like an afternoon driving around. Adam has this, you might have seen it, this 60s Lincoln.
Yeah.
You know, and it was my wife Tamsin and I, and Adam's wife Corinne, Adam, and then Phil, just kind of cruising around Malibu in this. And I remember at the time thinking, I was like, oh man, this is like such a cool kind of scenario. It was just so. It was very kind of like LA as well.
Yeah, totally. I'm finally one of the cool kids. So yeah, okay. So aside from the tool stuff, let's talk about you've had quite an amazing life from what I've read. Can you tell me about how you're basically, give me your life story in a nutshell?
Oh God.
Because it's got a lot of I don't. It seemed pretty intense, from what I've read.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really like downplay it. It has been pretty intense, just due to circumstances.
Right.
I mean, I'm originally from Bosnia, and it was part of Yugoslavia when I was, I was born in Yugoslavia. And
that's where my I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's where my that's where my stepdad's family is from.
Okay.
That's the name Zar is apparently Slavic.
Yeah.
I took my stepfather adopted me when I was like 12, and I took his name on. But yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No. No, that makes sense because Zar is Zar, but yeah.
Sounds like it kind of.
well, it is in my language. It is.
Oh, is it?
So yeah. But yeah. Anyway, I mean, we had a war Yugoslavia when it started falling apart. I mean, it's a long story.
Yeah.
And I was going to an art school because in Yugoslavia we had kind of German style schooling system. So after grade school at 14, you choose a direction. So you can go to like a vocational school, or you can go to so it was more specialized high schools rather than general education. So I was going to art school, which was like a dream come true for me. But the war started about 6 months into it.
Oh my God.
So I was in Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia. And for those who don't know, it was under siege for almost 4 years. It was the longest siege of a city in modern history.
I remember that. I think I'm probably, I don't know, 10 years older than you or something. And I remember that when it was on the news and everything. I got to ask you, it's like, what was that like? I mean, it seems absolutely terrifying.
I mean, it's a funny thing because only like, I think maybe even during the pandemic, I've started to realize more and more just what an effect it has had on me, because life has been so kind of full on and busy that I haven't really thought about it much. But it's, I do realize I have a lot of kind of PTSD because of it. Because as soon as it started, it kind of like started full on. It was shelling, grenades falling, the whole city on fire. And
oh my God.
We ran out of the electricity was cut off, the water was cut off, so we were kind of, because it was a Olympic city. Actually, the Olympics are going on now, and in 1984 Sarajevo had the Winter Olympics, so it was a very kind of modern, progressive, very highly educated population. Actually, it was quite a nice city, and then pretty much overnight we were turned into like a medieval existence.
Oh my God.
So we lived in concrete blocks, because I lived in an apartment, but without electricity, water, heating, it soon turns into a pretty kind of like cave-like existence.
Yeah. I imagine that also changes the demeanor of the people around you.
Well, everything, it's just, I mean, it's one of those things you see it in people from war zones. It's like the sustained fear,
right?
What it does to you, and then you get used to it. That's the problem,
right?
So you get used to living with this constant knowledge that you can, die pretty much any minute.
Yeah.
And then, I was a teenager, so between kind of, there would be like campaigns of like, shellings and rocket fire and stuff like that. So you can't go out; we would just hide in basements.
Oh my God!
But then in between those, it would be just sniper fires. So there would be no shelling, but there would always be snipers, because the city is like in a valley between mountains, and up on the mountains and hills around the city is where the enemy, I guess, forces were with artillery and snipers. And then, I was into heavy metal and comics and music, so I had a few friends. And then between my building and my friend's building was like a corridor that you could see straight up onto the hill, and a sniper would shoot down this corridor in between our buildings.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah, but for whatever reason, he only shot, or whoever, I imagine it was a man, but I don't know, would shoot up until about from about 10 in the morning, 11, something like that, to about 2 in the afternoon. So if I would cross before and then just hang out with my friends on the other side, kind of hidden from view, then wait until he would finish, and then I could go home.
Oh my God, that is insane, man. That's crazy.
That's, I mean, there are a few really good kind of documentaries. What is the one that I just recently watched for the first time? It was really amazing, and it's literally follows. It's a journalist who just goes to live in the city during the war. And it's the first time that I really saw footage of exactly how I remember it being.
Wow. Yeah, I'd like to know the name of it, maybe after, if you can think of it, because I'm a big documentary freak.
I want to say it's called something like, The Living and the Dead.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called, The Living and the Dead. And I mean, it's quite like a harrowing, watch, but it really was. Because often, when you watch the, documentaries by like journalists, they always try to kind of have an angle, and jazz it up, or, but this guy literally just went and lived there for in two different stretches for many months at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And lived with some people, and then next time he was there, they were dead, or they would die in the middle of like, his. And then he went and interviewed doctors and nurses during, because I lived actually quite close to the hospital, so a lot of I don't know how gruesome I should be, but you get to see. During a war, you get to see all kinds of stuff that.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I guess that's where like the whole kind of PTSD and trauma happens, is because you go into this almost like dissociative state.
Yeah.
And the things that you see don't feel real anymore.
Wow.
And I think it's only later that they kind of like, you wake up and you're like, oh man, that actually, was real.
Right. Yeah, I can't even imagine. Yeah, it's like, being an American, it's like you have no context for something like that. Unless you're, I guess unless you're in a war in like Iraq or Vietnam or something. But
yeah, I mean, the weird thing, to me, obviously, because when it started, I was 15, and it was like a real education and what kind of things normal people are capable of.
Right.
Because a lot of the combatants, a lot of the people on both sides were just normal people.
Yeah.
Literally like people that live next door. And suddenly, crazy ideologies going back hundreds of years, and I don't know, all kinds of stuff makes people do crazy shit.
Yeah, that's the scariest part, really, is that they're all just like you and me, just put in a situation where they were they were able to do these things, or they had to do these things, or under the influence of I mean, wasn't Milosevic like charged with war crimes and stuff?
A number of them were. So the General Mladic, who was the general of the Serb army, he was on trial for crimes against humanity. Karadzic, who was the leader of the the Serbian side, or sorry, not the Serbian, but the Serb side.
Okay.
There's a distinction between the two. And then Milosevic, who was the president of Serbia.
But he was, but it's like, but war, what they say, war is hell. It's like, just to get it, it's like, I've always felt that way, that I think about this with Nazis and stuff. It's like anybody in the right situation can do horrible things if they're, just the average person put in a certain set of circumstances can do all kinds of atrocities.
100%. You know how people say like, oh, I don't understand how so many Germans decided to follow Hitler, and I'm like, I can tell you, because I've seen it. Right. I've seen that literally normal people just get caught up in crazy things, and
it's incredible. Wow. Well, I don't want to get, have you gotten like therapy or anything for that? Not to get too personal, but I mean, I've gone through worse, a lot less worse than you have. And it's like, I had to go to therapy to deal with it. It was just personal stuff. It seems like that would really, really be
in a kind of a roundabout way, because I didn't realize it was really going back to that, I mean, it's not just that, you know, I had I was quite ill when I was very little.
Oh.
So I ended up, you know, having some serious surgeries when I was 3 years old. And then,
no. Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's kind of almost, when I start talking about it, it kind of seems like I'm making it up because there's so much.
Well,
you know,
your story is just like, you know, so heroic. You know, that's why, you know, I see you posting pictures of your success. Remember that Facebook post I commented on, and you were kind of talking about how you, you like to share that artists can make it. It's like the fact that you had these, you know, these traumas in your life as a kid, and you are where you are. It's like, it's amazing. It's like, it gives people hope. I think it's really great.
I always kind of, I rejected I mean, again, you know, my father was an alcoholic and kind of really, I don't know how to put this politely, but it was pretty much like an anti role model for me.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I kind of wanted to do everything opposite to what he
did. Yeah. That's how my wife is the same way with her dad. It's like she was able to recognize it early on, like, this is not the person I want to be, you know.
No, I mean, I remember, you know, being a kid, and my friends would be playing with like toy cars, and they would say like, "Oh, I'm my dad," and "I'm my dad," and I was like, "No, I'm not my dad."
Yeah, right.
He's a drunk. You know, I don't want to be. You know, right. So it's yeah. So I kind of feel like I'm not doing that whole. Hopefully, it doesn't come across that way. Maybe it does for some people, but I'm not, you know, trying to do that thing like, oh, you know, look, I've, you know, come from nothing and I made it. It's more just the fact that, because I don't, you know, I wish I was born rich and, you know,
it didn't have to deal with all that shit.
So yeah, and I don't, you know, there's no, I don't think there's any shame to being well off and then making it. It
right.
And I don't think anybody should be ashamed of being successful.
I agree.
And it's just that I think my story probably just kind of shuts up some of those people who say, well, it's easy for you because you were, you know,
right,
or this way or that way or whatever. And I can say, well, no, you know, I just, you know, I worked pretty hard. I had, you know, some breaks and, you know, had some, you know, everything in life is combination of work and luck.
Right.
So,
yeah, but that's, I don't know. It's an inspiring story. I think, especially nowadays, people need that. People need to hear inspiring stories, you know?
I mean, I think especially artists.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know so many artists, you know, they're really, really talented, but they just, are not great at standing up for themselves, you know, sticking up for. And I think that's what's really kind of driven this whole narrative. And that's, you know, the post you're talking about that I made, you know, it was kind of standing up against that, like, starving artist stereotype. You know, just because you're choosing to be an artist doesn't mean that you need to starve.
Yeah. And it's not part of, it doesn't have to be part of the myth, you know. It's like, I watched my stepdad was an artist, and I just watched him struggle because he was bad at business. Really bad at business, which most artists are, I think. And part of the reason I kind of wanted to be successful and still want to be even more successful is for him, in a way, because it's like, I know he would be proud. I mean, he saw me getting pretty successful before he died. So that was really cool. But I really feel like I'm doing it for him as much as for myself and my family, you know, in his honor, sort of, you know. Because I knew, it's like, he could have done it. He just, you know, if he had some help, and I was trying to help him actually at the end of his life, but he died. Yeah, so I'm with you there, man. I agree that whole starving artist myth is such bullshit. It just really is damaging to actual artists that are compelled to create, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I don't know. I wonder sometimes whether, you know, if I didn't have the experiences I had, whether I wouldn't be quite at, like, as because part of the whole PTSD thing is that the hypervigilance, which has actually made me quite shrewd at business decisions, because I'm always aware that, or I'm always suspicious of whether somebody's trying to screw me.
Right.
And I wonder if if I didn't have that, whether I would not be quite as forceful with certain things. I mean, you never know. So it's one of those. I just actually watched the TV show Devs, and it deals with kind of the many worlds theories, and it kind of plays into that, and it's fascinating. Like the same person but with different paths.
Right.
I do wonder sometimes whether I would have been better off if there was no war, or if I would have been worse.
Right. Yeah. It's like you just can never know. You can never know. It's fascinating though.
Because in comics especially, I realized that a lot of artists, amazing artists, I mean, incredible artists I've been a fan of for decades, but they have been fans of comics, and it's almost like the dream has come true, and that's all they know, and that's all they do, and
right.
A lot of them struggle because it doesn't pay very well,
right?
And and I look at it, and I just think but there is so much like skill and knowledge and intellect there, that really there should be a better way.
Yeah.
But
you the thing is, it's like I think part of the artist's path is, it's like the world is just not geared. It's not geared or oriented towards artists or the artist's mindset. And so if you want success with your art, I mean, if you want to create your art and earn a living from it, you got to fucking grab it, and you got to do all the things that make you uncomfortable. You got to learn marketing, at least I'm coming from like a fine art perspective. All the stuff.
It's the same, 100%. I agree.
All the stuff you don't want to do, you have to do it. And I kind of feel like, as much as it's a pain in the ass, and it would be nice if the world was a little more, friendlier to the artistic temperament, it makes us be, I think, more well-rounded people as people, because it forces us outside of our comfort zones, and it forces us to learn these skills that we may not necessarily have naturally, like just being able to talk to someone you don't know and talk about your artwork, and learn how to start a business, and learn how to do bookkeeping and all these things that are like, if we had our way, I know for me, I'd just be sitting and creating, and that's it. But since I was forced to do all these things to make it a living, it's made me a better person, really, overall from it.
Oh, I 100%. I mean, the dream. I still dream, to win the lottery and then do nothing, but just create, do my own stuff. And,
right.
And not have to worry ever again about, any of the, the boring bits. But, I agree 100%. But I also think just solving problems within art has actually, because I think I bore my wife to death with like making comparisons in like life situations to how I solve problems when I do art.
Yeah, right.
Because and this is the thing that I don't know whether other artists see, that they actually already have those skill sets.
Exactly.
They just need to be able to apply them to other things.
It's so true.
Just figuring out, some like complex kind of lighting situations and specular highlights.
Right.
It requires so much kind of consideration and thought, and
it's actually much more difficult than just the the marketing, the business and stuff like that is way easier than learning how to be a painter or be an artist.
100%.
It's like way harder to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just I also blame, I would say, the educational system, because you're taught all of these things that you never use. But how about teaching kids, like some proper kind of economics and marketing?
I know.
In a way that like makes you feel like, oh, okay, yeah, because I remember first time having to pay taxes. And I'm like, what is this?
Yep.
Like, how does this work?
Yeah.
Because I was living in the States at the time, and I remember like I was working at Nintendo. It was my first proper job, and they were like, oh, what deductions do you put?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
What's a deduction?
Deduction. So I think I ended up having like 3 children or something on paper because I didn't know.
Right.
There were these couple of guys at work, and they're like, oh yeah, just tick off, whatever 3, and you'll pay less tax. I was like, oh great, I'll pay less tax. But now obviously I know what that was. It's just at the time I was like, oh great,
Yeah, I was the same way. I grew up with, we had no money, and my parents were not good business people at all, and I didn't know anything. I mean, it's funny. My wife teases me about it now, but when I first got into the effects business on the Blob, that movie, The Blob, I was still living at home and with my mom, and I would get paid checks every week, and I would give them to my mom, and she would deposit them in my checking account for me. I'd never even been and cashed a check. I didn't know any of that stuff. I would have like my wife at the time, when she was my girlfriend, she'd come over and just see these like checks laying all around, because I was making good money living at home. I didn't know the value of money at all, really. I was just used to being kind of poor all the time, and it just it didn't really phase me, because I was just doing what I really wanted to, which is effects stuff. And but yeah, I had, I can't believe it's like, and then I get into the real world, and I'm like, how did they not teach me how to balance a checkbook in high school? Nothing.
That's exactly it.
It's like, these are the basics that you need to survive in the world, especially in America. It's like, you need to know that shit. And I think maybe it's changed now, but when I was a kid, they didn't teach you anything.
I mean, as far as I know, they you don't learn that kind of stuff until you're in college.
Oh, right.
I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but that's because it seems like something really that would be
number one priority.
Because our world, especially in the West, is built on capitalism.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, they don't teach you anything, how to deal with it. It's like, it's kind of fucked up.
No, when I was really, really poor. And then I graduated. I went to Art Institute in Seattle, and I got the job at Nintendo. Straight, like I got it at the graduation, actually. So I kind of didn't really experience having to, hunt for a job. And then, at the time, I mean, it wasn't that much money, but at the time, I couldn't believe, like, suddenly I was making this money from being an artist at Nintendo. But what I did is I went and bought a car immediately that cost so much, the monthly payments, that I was just back to being as poor as I was before, except I had a nice car, and this car literally drove me into absolute poverty, and then I also totaled it.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I mean, I was whatever, I was 21 maybe.
Yeah, these are the mistakes.
For the first time ever having some money, and I was always into cars. Well, I never had a car before, but as a kid, I always liked cars. So of course, I immediately went and bought the most expensive car I could afford in finance, not considering that literally it was going to just put me back on the bread line.
Yeah, the mistakes that young men make. But that's a perfect example of not being prepared to enter the workforce, really. Yeah. Okay, so I do want to get into your work history and how that developed. But first, so there was a point when you fled the war zone, basically, right? And where did you go to after that? And what was that like, even too?
Well, I mean, that was I probably should at some point write some of this stuff down, because actually, it is quite fascinating, because so the war hasn't finished. It was I just started to become more and more uncomfortable about the religious narrative that was starting to happen, that I didn't really, see, because Yugoslavia was a communist state, and I grew up without religion. But then what I didn't realize, especially living in the city, is that there was this undercurrent of real religious animosity. And as the war kind of progressed, suddenly it came to the fore, and I became very uncomfortable. And by this point, I was 16, I guess. And my father was, just destructive force, and I didn't really want anything to do with him. But my mom and sister and I convinced them that we should leave and go, somewhere elsewhere. And I was drawing. I was going to art school, and then I did some art for a bar in the city that operated during the war, which French UN soldiers would frequent. So they were the clientele for this bar. And then I did the art for the bar, and the French soldiers saw it, and then they started asking me to draw for them in exchange for food and food as in chocolate and Coca-Cola.
Right.
So instead of paying me, they would just, because there was no chocolate, there was no Coke in the city, but they had it obviously on their military base. So in exchange for art, I would get chocolate and Coke, and I would keep some of the chocolate, but Coke I would sell immediately to the bar.
Wow.
So through that, I was able to actually get some money, and then we used that money to kind of organize a way out of the city. And as it happened, it was a UN convoy leaving the city, taking some refugees out, and we got onto this convoy, and it was just a couple of buses with UN escort, but then you had to go through the enemy lines.
Oh my God.
And even though we had UN escort, we still were completely at the mercy of the we had to go. I mean, take too long to describe, but it literally was like something out of some kind of a post-apocalyptic movie.
Wow.
Going through the front line and going through like the checkpoint. And
oh my God, it must have been terrifying.
Well, the worst thing, actually, just quickly, the worst thing about it was because they were letting anybody who wasn't Serb leave. But if you had a Serb-sounding name, you were in trouble trying to leave. So there were people in the city who were still, Serbs who stayed in the city, and they tried to leave. And the Serb military had a list of names, and they came onto the bus and took off the bus anybody who had a Serb name, and we never saw it again.
Oh my God.
The buses continued, and these people were, I assume, kept there. So anyway, we made it out, and they dropped us off just in the first city that was, or town that was back in Bosnian, under Bosnian control. And then from there, we paid our own way to Croatia. And then we were in Zagreb as refugees for about, I guess, a year and a half.
Wow.
In a two different shelters.
Wow.
I mean, they're again, sounds surreal. Technically, because our plan was actually to go to Germany, because I had, or I guess I still have, an uncle in Germany, my father's brother, who guaranteed, in order to become a refugee somewhere, you have to have somebody sponsoring you to get there. And he was, he promised us this, but then when we got to Croatia, he abandoned us.
Oh no.
So we were stuck. We were stuck in Croatia then for a year and a half, and then during that time, again, I kind of was like pushing for different things. So I pushed to try to get onto the refugee program to go to the US, and that's eventually what happened. And then in '95, at the very end of '95, in December, we went to the US, and we thought we were going to Baltimore because there was a refugee center in Baltimore. But by the time we landed in New York, there was a guy there waiting for us, and he said, "Okay, I'm taking you to another flight. You're going to Portland." And I was like, "Where's Portland?" I had no idea. And this guy, he was a Bosnian guy, and I remember it was kind of again like a surreal. He was a Bosnian guy, and he was missing an arm. So I'm assuming he was also a refugee from the war.
Right.
But he was so unpleasant. He was so surly. Anyway, he kind of rushed us through JFK, and we got onto this other flight, and it was a red-eye overnight flight, and we were exhausted by that point because we flew from we took a bus from Zagreb to Vienna, and then from Vienna we flew to Amsterdam, and then from Amsterdam to New York. Jeez. So by that point we were just shattered.
Yeah.
And then we were this overnight flight to Portland, and we have no idea where the hell Portland is.
Oh my God.
And it was a very empty flight. I think there were like 6 or 7 people on it.
Wow.
And then the flight attendant was like, "Oh, you will love it there, and let me show you on the map." And she showed me where Portland was. And the first time I was like, "Oh, okay, we're going to the West Coast."
Yeah, it's a lot cooler place than Baltimore, I think, especially.
I've never actually been to Baltimore, so but I've heard, So yeah, so we ended up in Portland, and and I was in Portland only for about 8 months, and they put me in a high school because I just didn't have the credits that would convert to anything let me graduate high school or whatever. And I was already 19 at that point. And I went to this high school for a few months, and I realized because even with my interrupted war education, the standard of education in Bosnia was just so much higher than in a U.S. public high school that I could barely speak English, and I was given to read Grapes of Wrath, the by Steinbeck. And I remember in class I was the only person who could actually discuss it with the teacher. I could barely, so that kind of convinced me that maybe I should probably get the hell out of there.
Right. Definitely.
So I got GED, and then I could go and moved to Seattle to go to the Art Institute there in '96.
Seattle's cool. I like Seattle.
Yeah, I love Seattle. I stayed there a long time. I was there 6 years.
Oh, wow. I worked there on a movie for a couple of months, I think. It was great. I love the rainy weather, so it was good for me.
Yeah, I mean, it was because I was there, late 90s. It was just kind of, it was 96 to 2001. 2002, actually, sorry. What was cool about it is, the grunge era had kind of just like come to an end, but it was still a very kind of grungy, cool city.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like really weird stuff, and especially, student housing was downtown next to a park that was dubbed the Crack Park because so it was an experience, and all of those old venues, where all of the grunge bands used to play and stuff, they were still there. Because now when you go back to Seattle, it's all gone.
Right.
Most of those places, it's been very gentrified and stuff, but it really was a very alternative and cool place back then.
Yeah. I think it was like I'm sure it was around. It was like mid '90s when I was there working on this movie, this stupid movie. we had we were doing a gorilla suit called Born to Be Wild. It was dumb. It was like a kid's movie, but yeah, it was cool. It was. I remember it was very kind of like, I don't know. The people were really chill and cool, and I enjoyed it.
I really liked it, and I think that whole period. Maybe it's more of a subjective thing rather than a real objective kind of thing. But those years between me being there and 9/11, I have a real like good kind of like memory of. And then 9/11 happening, I remember just the mood shifting so much that in my mind that was almost like a end of an era and beginning of a different kind of
it was too. It was everywhere. I think it was like that everywhere. Okay, so you were, what was let's talk about your work experience.
Yeah, sorry, I have a tendency to blab.
No, it's perfect. This is the way we love it here. It's just about having a good conversation, but I'm interested to hear how you climbed this ladder and got to where you are today. It's kind of amazing.
So I went to the Art Institute, and at my graduation show, a guy from Nintendo, he was the vice president of a development company owned by Nintendo called Nintendo Software Technologies, and he was the vice president, and they were just setting it up. It was brand new, and he came to the portfolio show and invited me for an interview, and I had a job within the week.
So your stuff must have been good back then for your age and stuff, I imagine.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was good. It was, looking back on it, it wasn't great, but it was good. I think it was good enough. It was a bit of a weird thing because it was mostly not mostly, all character art and illustration. And then that's what I was hired for. And then the very first job they gave me was a car racing game to design a racetrack. And I was like, I've never done anything even remotely. Like, I had no idea. Yeah. And because the company was brand new, and they had a team in Canada that hasn't moved down to see up to Renton, where it was, or Redmond, sorry, near Seattle, where it was. So I was there on my own for a couple of months in this office, and I was like, what am I doing here? I have no idea what I'm doing. Nobody's telling me what like, they just said, okay, design some cars and a track. I'm like, what? So it was a really, really odd experience.
Yeah, I've been in situations like that before.
And I remember, just kind of sitting there, and I'm like, literally, it's like being told, build a jet engine, and I'm like, what? Like, where do I even go? I stayed there about two and a bit years, and but I was really getting quite like antsy, and I didn't like working in an office environment. I didn't like meetings. I realized even back then, that it was just to tick boxes, and it was constant meetings, and I was like, well, I could get so much work done if I wasn't sitting here listening to some nonsense. So I just wasn't really enjoying it, and then I decided to quit and try to kind of I started doing some on the side kind of in the evenings, illustration for Wizards of the Coast.
Oh, cool.
So that was going, pretty well. So I was like, okay, I'm going to quit Nintendo and try to make it, freelance. And then I got work with a comic book and media company called Humanoids, who were setting up a Los Angeles base to try to. They have a huge catalog of like back catalog of properties, and they were trying to kind of launch them as TV and movie projects. Anyway, I decided, okay, I'm going to move to LA and see how that goes, because I had a friend living down there, and I went to LA and it went terribly.
Oh no!
Absolutely terribly. This company. I've already said their name, so I can't really say I should. But I have nothing but bad feelings towards them.
Wow. That sucks. What part of LA were you living in?
Burbank.
Oh, okay.
Because this friend of mine, he was working at Disney Interactive at the time, and he lived in Burbank. So I went and stayed with him. And then the idea was that I was gonna find my own place. But by the time that kind of, came about, I realized I had run out of money, and B, I just, mostly the money was the issue, and I just couldn't really make it.
Right.
So by this point, my mom and sister were living in Chicago. So I packed up and went to stay with them. And then I just stayed in Chicago for 3 years. But during that time, sorry, I'm kind of skipping, I'm getting lost again. But yeah, so when I went to Chicago, then I was kind of at a really low point because this whole LA adventure really fell through. And then a Canadian company, comic book company, contacted me to do a comic book for them. And it was a fairly small kind of time comic book, but I think I did really good work on it. And that company ran into financial troubles. And just around that time, when they were having these financial troubles, I get an email from the talent scout from Marvel, who happens to now be the editor-in-chief of Marvel, C.B. Cebulski, saying, "Oh, we love your work, on this book you did, and if you have any interest to work for Marvel, the door's open."
Wow.
And that was 2003, and I was, I just jumped at the chance because, like I said, this company had run into financial troubles and they owed me money, and I was yet again, it's like a pattern of being in a really, 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 bad place.
Right.
And Marvel came along, and then bit by bit, one of the first jobs they gave me or asked me to do was covers for an Iron Man book. And at the time, it's kind of almost unbelievable to think now, but Iron Man was actually like a B-list, forgotten, outdated, character that's
so crazy.
Only like hardcore, fans from like the 70s and kind of 80s followed. And then I guess these covers I did kind of, caught some attention and helped the sales a bit. So then this was around the time that Marvel started thinking about, because they've basically licensed out all of their best characters. So Spider-Man, X-Men and stuff, they licensed them out to other movie companies. So they couldn't do anything themselves with them. So they decided to try to pump up the characters that they had left, which were, these outdated, again, unbelievable to think that, but Avengers, right. Captain America, Iron Man, all of these, they were these funny. Characters. Basically, they were like the scraps that they had left. So they were doing a relaunch of all of the Avengers, and they asked me to illustrate the relaunch of Iron Man. And it took me about 1.5 years to do these 6 issues of Iron Man, but it became really quite popular because it was, it'll sound really modest, but it was fairly revolutionary as far as the design and art style go.
Yeah.
I don't think people in American comics had seen much of that kind of stuff before,
right.
Where you could really believe that a human could be inside the suit or whatever.
Right.
And by this point, I had already moved to the UK because of my wife, because she's from here. So I moved here in 2005, and this book was kind of coming out 2004, 2005. And I think maybe the last issue came out in 2006 or something like that. And by this point, I was moderately successful. I was just very slow because all of my stuff is painted. So, to do comic book pages, it's takes forever. And the page is not very good if you can't do more than, a page a day. and I could do a page a week kind of thing.
Right.
So, but it was okay. It wasn't like, I wasn't starving anymore. But then they decided to launch Marvel Studios, and their first project as a movie was going to be Iron Man. And this is why I can't really say anything bad about social media, because like I at the beginning mentioned about Adam and Facebook, Jon Favreau was announced as being the director of the first Iron Man movie, and he had a MySpace page. And I was like, well, I have nothing to lose, so I sent him a message on MySpace, and he responded like immediately, and he said,
amazing.
"Oh man, I love your book. I love the Iron Man Extremis, the book." And I was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And then he's like, "Oh, would you want to do a poster for the movie that we could promote at this year's Comic-Con in San Diego?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I could." So I did this poster, but in order to do the poster, they didn't want the comic book design. They wanted something new. So I had to design. I went through the whole design process to design like a new kind of Iron Man suit, and to feature on this poster. And I thought that was it. But then, as it happens, they hired a new production designer, and when they presented to him various designs that they were working on, including this design that I did for the poster, he said, "Well, this is the one." And then Jon Favreau came back to me and said, "Hey, would you want to work on the movie?"
Wow.
And so that's it, kind of. I'm not going to blab on anymore.
No, that's amazing. That must have been so exciting.
It's just sort of those things, because at the same time, I was, having this kind of international romance with my wife, who was living in England, and then we got married in Vegas, and then we were kind of living apart, going back and forth during those years. And then in 2005, I moved here, and then so all of it is kind of like, when I look back, it's like, man, just action.
Yeah.
Like just
no rest at all, I imagine. So were you doing, you were traveling and doing that work, or were you able to, mail things or email or? Yeah,
at that point, it was all already done. Oh, you mean on the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I worked. We lived in a tiny little apartment in Leeds, in England, and I was doing in the living room. I had a desk set up, and I was doing these things for Iron Man. And then Jon Favreau would call me at 2 a.m. I don't know if he ever really fully got hold like the full understanding of time zones. But he would call me at 2 a.m. to talk about Iron Man for like hours, and so I would just then send stuff in. And the only time I ever really went in was they asked me to come out when they sent the stuff to Stan Winston Studios for modeling.
Oh, right.
And they were struggling with understanding some of the like surfacing, and they presented it to me as like it was like a really big problem. When I got there, I was like, oh, it's already 80% there. It's just a bit of like pinching here and there and stuff. So for about 4 days, we sat at Stan Winston and art directed the 3D models, and that was the only like quote unquote work really, because I wasn't really working. All I was doing is like pointing. But
right. Who was doing the modeling? Do you remember the name?
Oh God, no, I can't remember. He was a really nice guy, but I can't remember his name.
Was it cool? Was it, there's often times, I know in makeup effects, people would come into art direct things, and a lot of times the sculptors would get a little bent out of shape.
No, he was a really nice guy actually, and we really got on really well.
That's great.
And because there was 3 of us concept designers on Iron Man, Phil Saunders and Ryan Meinerding and me, and to this day they're still and Ryan is actually the head of visual development at Marvel Studios. He's like a vice president. He's a really good friend of mine. To this day I work with him, but both with him and Phil. So we kind of like have had this like really long kind of relationship now, but that was our first meeting really. But I think Ryan was I don't want to like, I don't remember exactly, but what you're mentioning, I think he had more of those issues. While I, if I remember correctly, I mean, maybe I was just so oblivious because I was like, wow, this is cool. You know, there's Terminator, there's aliens, you know, there's all this stuff. I was like, yeah, this Iron Man model is cool. It's like, you know, and I think that probably helped a lot because I think the guys at Marvel Studios were really worried, and they had another completely different vendor building a model. And I never got to meet this other vendor. Just they showed me the one that Stan and Winston were building that they were really worried about. And I was like, oh no, I was like, that looks good to me. It just needs like a bit of tweaking. And immediately in front of me, they called this other vendor and let him go.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh shit, I didn't mean for that to happen. You know, I don't want anybody to lose their job.
Right.
But then I think that's why also then when I went into Stan Winston, I think they were quite like happy with me because I, you know, said that, you know, this is actually looking really good. We can
right.
and actually, you know, those 4 days that we were there is actually really what you end up seeing in the movie.
Right.
So it really did produce, you know, really awesome work.
Was this a computer model you guys were working on, or is this a clay model?
Yeah, it was a computer model.
Okay.
I know that somebody was also doing a sculpt. But in the end, I think the computer model was so good that they could just do a half-scale print of that. And because I remember seeing, and I think actually it's even on there's like a making of Iron Man film that came out as a special extra disc with the Iron Man DVD back in the day. And I think it has some footage of a sculptor working on an Iron Man helmet. But it doesn't look 100% like it looks in the film. So I think maybe it was just one of those things that they were trying to cover all bases.
Right.
But,
yeah, a lot of that goes on.
But it's really funny, actually. Again, you know, going back to the very beginning, how like everybody seems to know everybody. So I'm assuming you know Shane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know who he was, you know, but I was there. You know, he was you know, kind of hanging out with us, kind of, you know, managing, and we started talking about music, and he started talking about Tool. And I was like, oh, I'm a huge fan of Tool, and he's like, oh yeah, Adam used to work here, and he's like, yeah, Adam asked me to be a drummer in his band. And all this stuff, and then, you know, fast forward like a few years later, well, not even a few years later, like what was that, 2007, and then like 2011. So yeah, like 4 years later, I meet Adam, and then, you know, from a different perspective, and it's all interconnected, and it's like everybody seems to kind of
super weird. Just a small world. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
So now are you like, do you freelance, or are you like permanently like a Marvel
No, I'm always free. I've always stayed freelance.
Oh, cool.
I mean, I have an exclusive contract with Marvel Comics since 2004, which basically means that for comic book work, I'm exclusive to them.
Okay.
But for everything else, I'm completely freelance, except I get a contract for a movie or a TV show or whatever. So like right now, I'm working on a thing for Marvel Studios again, and that's it's a contract. But
okay, so it's like for the film stuff, you still work for Marvel, but you're not really like a staff person. You're like, you
No,
get hired
no.
out, but the comics, you got this exclusive deal with them.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a very outdated thing. I think they got really into like doing these exclusives back in, you know, like 2000s. But I think because, you know, I'm fairly like, you know, my work is fairly popular. They don't want to let me go.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. You kind of have the best of both worlds in a way.
Yeah.
You know, freelance and a regular gig.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm lucky enough to be able to, you know, pick and choose like what I want to do and when I want to do it.
Yeah. That's the dream.
But yeah, I mean, Ryan, who I just mentioned from Marvel Studios, you know, he when he asked me to work on something, I always do it because I really like working with them. And so yeah, you know, we've done some really quite like extraordinary stuff together over the years. So it feels like, you know, when my days are numbered, yeah, it feels like it will have been something that I will remember as you know, a good thing to have been.
Yeah. It's always great to have a person that you work well with, that you respect as an artist, you know.
But yeah, I mean, I guess when you start kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's the pandemic again, but I feel like I've been kind of a lot of like philosophical about a lot of this stuff. And even like considering those relationships, you know, that I was with Phil and Ryan, and it kind of like, I'm thinking of them in like, you know, they're like such a big part of my life, and you know, we are here for such a short time that it feels like a worthwhile kind of thing to have done or to still be doing, you know, and hopefully to be doing for, you know, quite a while yet. But I don't know.
What kind of do you have like personal projects you're doing or anything that's it's like I don't know, just like this thing you want to do, or are you just kind of like chilling with the hired work? Or
I mean, most of my stuff has been tool related, and then I did a design and an illustration of a character that then you know, sideshow collectibles like licensed to turn into a statue. So, and that is fully my own thing.
Really? Those fuckers. I remember I met with them because I know Tom Gilliland.
Yeah.
One of the owners. He was the guy when I started working at Rick Baker's. He was the painter there. He hadn't, and he left. I was taking over for him. He kind of trained me to take over his job because he was going to start Sideshow. And I had a meeting with them years after, you know, I go to have a meeting with them years later, and they have this huge facility. I was like, oh my God, this place it was just like, it was huge.
Oh, it was massive, yeah.
Just really impressive. And they wanted me to do some sculpting for them, like design creatures for their intellectual property. I think it was probably that Court of the Dead stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, actually, I want to do my own stuff. And I was thinking maybe you guys could produce stuff I'm doing, because I've got my own characters, which is this dystopia book I just put out. And he's like, yeah, we don't really do individual things for artists like that. So I guess I wasn't enough of a hot shot that they did it.
I think, I mean, I don't really know, but
that's amazing though that they did yours. That's really cool.
Well, the art director at the time, who is a really good friend of mine, has left since. So I don't, you know, I don't know if it has anything to do with any of that. But,
right.
I think it was a moment in time that was, you know, good for me.
Right.
But I don't really have any kind of illusions that it would happen again. It's one of those things. And the statue, it's an unknown quantity, and if they can sell thousands of Iron Man, and then struggle to sell 250 of these creator-owned things, I understand that they don't really have an incentive,
right?
I don't really know, their business. It's just that I've worked with them quite a lot over the years because they've done a lot of stuff based on my Marvel work, and I'm sure that helped with the selling, the idea of doing my design. I'm just really happy that it happened.
No, that's cool. It's awesome.
It just came out actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just it went on pre-order over a year ago, but I just got mine like 2 weeks ago.
What's it called?
It's called Sova.
How do you spell that?
S-O-V-A.
S-O-V-A.
It just means owl in Bosnian.
Oh, okay.
Because the character has an owl, and I was just trying to be a bit clever and just use
right. Let me see here. Here we go. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah,
it turned out really good.
Yeah, really cool.
They did a really. It's kind of a. I have a friend who cool. Whose family live in Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's Singaporean originally, but he lives in the States. But with like his kind of help, we organized a gallery exhibit to benefit a charity, a children's charity in Singapore. And for that exhibit, I did a painting that was just an original painting, and it was that character.
Oh, cool.
And that's all it was really meant to be. But then my friend Dave, who was the art director at Sideshow, just loved that painting. And then, one thing led to another, and then eventually they asked if they could license it to turn it. So that basically this kind of like a thing I was doing with a friend,
right,
for this exhibit turned into something, really, really. It was cool to begin with, but it turned into something really, really cool.
Yeah.
It's just the original painting had a motorcycle. She was sitting on a motorcycle, but then in discussions with Sideshow, it would have been a very large, very expensive statue. So I redesigned the base. So the character is the same, but instead of the motorcycle, it's a jet engine that she's sitting on.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, that's great. Sideshow's awesome. They're cool. Tom's amazing. Tom Gilliland's super cool. I remember him talking about starting Sideshow back, we were these like grunt painter guys at Rick Baker's, painting a bunch of bullshit. And
everything starts somewhere.
I know. He had the big dream too. It was like really cool. We would talk about stuff a lot. I did a, you can't see it, but I did a thing sculpture for them, like a thing bust.
Yeah.
That was really fun. They were cool to work with. Well, so are you, do you want to make your own comic? Is that something that you want to do even?
No, not really. I probably wouldn't mind coming up with like, the characters and the illustrations and stuff, but I would, if that would, if a comic made sense, I'd probably prefer someone else to draw it.
Yeah.
And it's purely from, I spent so long on my work that it would be completely impractical.
Right.
And I was, like I was mentioning, I was pretty broke when I did it in my 20s, and I really don't want to be that broke again. So it just, like, as if going back to like winning the lottery, that maybe and it'll be a passion project. But I just I found kind of my like I guess specialty, or my like market for the kind of work that I like doing, and comic book pages just doesn't really fit in with that, because it's just so time consuming.
I bet. Yeah, I don't know how they do it. That's one of the reasons I never really pursued getting into comics. Is I also heard it doesn't pay as well when you're doing the pages
Well,
and
that's
stuff.
the irony. If I do a cover, it takes less time than doing a page the way I do it, because I like doing everything to the same kind of level.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably why it took so long on that Iron Man book, because every panel was painted as detailed and as complex as a cover. So you suddenly you're doing,
that's crazy, man.
Yeah, you're doing 6 covers per page for pay that is a third less than a cover pays, and it's taking 10 days. So you can totally see why I was broke,
right?
So, because if you can do a page a day or something like that, you can do a pretty you can
make a decent rate.
decent living.
Yeah.
But suddenly if you're doing it 7 times longer, it doesn't really work.
Right.
But the irony is, covers are they pay a bit better, but then also they are worth so much more as original art pieces.
Oh yeah, right.
And interior pages, and suddenly doing one cover is probably worth as much as doing a whole issue of a comic book.
Wow.
Which is the so from a purely pragmatic point of view, I can only see doing interior art as a passion project.
Right.
But I have been for quite a while at a stage of my career that I don't. There's been a long time that I've had to do something. I can choose what I do,
right?
When I do it, kind of thing. So long story short, it's just I don't really see it happening.
Yeah, I would much rather do a cover. Sounds like a cool gig, doing a cover, just like a single image that's badass, and you could focus all your attention on the single image and just make it perfect.
And I've even I never really wanted to do comics. I only at the time it was a job on offer, and I wanted to do a really good job on it. So it turned out good, but my focus was always illustration. And back in the day, I wanted to be a poster artist. It's just that market, it just the whole industry disappeared really.
Right.
But luckily, other doors opened, and there's so much other kind of so many other opportunities for artists. Because for a while there, I was wondering is commercial art going to be just extinct because everything is just photoshopped headshots thing.
Yeah.
But luckily, there are people who appreciate art and appreciate the skill, and especially because again, for a while it was like, it's all going to be digital, and nobody wants, but it's not true. People actually still really appreciate the skill of doing something traditional, doing it on a physical piece of whatever, canvas or paper or whatever.
Right. Well, what techniques are you using? I mean, what's your you're an acrylic guy mostly?
Yeah, it's that kind of came about a roundabout way. I didn't actually choose it as because I felt it was the best technique. It's just in college I found it the most difficult. I just found it baffling, and I was like, I want to master acrylic so I can feel like I've conquered this thing. And then through that I realized that actually acrylic allows me to do stuff that it's not perfect, but it allows me to do such a wide kind of variety of stuff that that's kind of what I've stuck with. And especially because I also use airbrush, kind of probably I would say, I don't know, like 3 out of 5 pieces I do have at least some part of airbrush on them. And acrylic, again, it's all acrylic. Acrylic ink, acrylic, paint and stuff. So it just seems like to me the most kind of versatile material. And I do a lot of digital stuff, especially when I work on concept art for film stuff.
Yep.
I
That's
do
what I
a
used
lot
to
of
do
it
too.
digitally because it's just so much easier to.
Yeah, and they want it fast, and it's easy to make changes to also.
Yeah, Marvel Studios is interesting, actually. They don't really care about the speed as much.
Huh.
But I think this is because Ryan is the head there, and he understands that good work requires, time and effort and stuff. So we actually are allowed to really take stuff to like, to take it to its kind of like end, not because of time restraints, but because it's like, okay, this is the best we can do, kind of thing.
That's great.
Which is actually, really quite excellent.
Yeah, that's how it was at Rick Baker's too. It was the first shop I worked at where it was like they let you take the time to do it right, and you were expected to, do it as well as could be possibly done, which is always nice.
No, that's always, because I don't know, I really respect, like passion and skill and effort. Because I see concept art for some other stuff, and it's just like photo bashed, photoshoppy stuff, and it does the job. But I, as an artist, to me that feels like, I don't know, I don't want to, I'm not like thinking of anybody in particular. Just sometimes when I see some stuff, I'm like, I just couldn't do it because I would get nothing out of it.
Right.
Out of the paycheck. But like,
right.
I just, I don't know, maybe I'm just spoiled to it by having been allowed to do it the way I want to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's amazing though. You've carved your own path, and you're able to. I mean, you're living the dream. You're living the dream. You kind of, you're just saying you can pick and choose your projects. You get to paint in the medium you want. You live in a cool house. Got cool cars. It's awesome.
I mean, sometimes I kind of, I'm basically trying to satisfy an 80-year-old me, which is I suppose I'm in that way. It's like a stereotypical kind of like middle age.
Yeah. Yeah, but think of where you came from, though. It's incredible. It's like you may not see it that way because you lived it, but it's amazing.
I do. I can appreciate it. It's just one of those things. I remember when I was in college. So it was only like a couple of years after the war and stuff, and people there were like, "Oh, compared to your problems, like all of this seems trivial." But I'm like, yeah, but everybody's problems are, relative and relevant to them.
Right.
And so even now, I like this pandemic has really done a number on my kind of mental state, just from having to be in my own head, sitting at home for like a very prolonged amount of time, and then I think like, well, what do I have to complain about?
Right.
I have a nice home, and I do a job that I have always dreamed about. What am I like upset about? But again, I think we all have to.
It is relative. It's it's relative.
Because I've through my work, I've met some like people that are huge, what you would consider like properly like hugely successful, and they can be just as miserable as everybody else.
Sometimes more miserable.
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember that first time I went to stay with Adam. He was really upset because, and to be fair, I'm entirely with him, but one of his neighbors at a house he had, when he wasn't there, they wanted a better view, so they hired someone to come and cut his trees down.
Oh no.
and he was really, really upset about this.
I'd be
I was
pissed.
like, yeah, that's fucked up, like really fucked up. But again, here, it's the guitar player for one of the greatest bands of all time, and he was really upset about these trees being cut, and I was like, yeah, everybody hurts.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and it's like people on that level don't. I don't know. They kind of don't get the, and the public doesn't allow them to suffer.
And this is another thing. Going back to like the whole thing about like not being ashamed of your success. I don't want to allow that kind of thing. Like, oh, what do you have to be upset about? Look at your life. It's like, well, everybody should be allowed to be upset.
Right. It's part of being human,
I mean, you can win 100 million on a lottery and then get cancer. You're not supposed to be upset that you have cancer.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. Well, what an incredible story, man. I really appreciate you taking time to come on. It's like very extremely interesting, and again, it's inspiring. I think it's really a story. You should write it down. You really should write it down. Your life story sounds kind of amazing. I mean, it's aside from the artwork, aside from you're an amazing artist, and it's like the other stuff on top of that makes it a very interesting and compelling story.
I think about it more like not about kind of like, oh, this is what happened to me or this is what I experienced. It's more just like, I think it's interesting just describing the things that I've seen.
Right.
So it's not even about like, oh, I went through this. It's more
it's not about you. It's about the experience itself. You want to share it because it's so crazy and interesting.
I just like quickly, because I find it's kind of like inspired me my whole life. But I during the war, and the city was completely bombed out, and I had this girlfriend that lived quite far on the other side of the city, and I would have to walk like to it would take about an hour and a bit to walk, and I would walk across the train station that was completely bombed out. So there were these trains that were shelled, and then they were rusting. And I remember coming back, and it was just me on the platform of the train station with these bombed out trains, and just having this moment. Even at that age, I was, I guess, 16 at the time, and it was almost like I'm living like in a movie. It was like a scene out of Mad Max or something like that. Yeah. And I had this like real sense of serenity, and it kind of, it felt like I was a character in a movie, and it wasn't really about me. It was more just about the scenery.
Right.
And even then, I could appreciate that I was seeing something that many people will not have seen in their lives. And so it kind of stuck with me, and I kind of feel like maybe some other people would find it interesting someday if I have the time to actually write it down.
It'd be an awesome, I hate to say it, but it would be amazing, like graphic novel.
It would. Yeah, no, that's it's true.
It would be really amazing. And it would be, it would be popular. It would do well too. There, I got your next project for you.
I know.
Get busy.
Somebody wants to finance it and pay me to like maintain like what I'm.
Tell your life story in a comic book. I think it'd be pretty amazing. I mean, you're how many Tool posters have you done for the tours?
I don't know, maybe 7 or 8, or
wow.
I mean, without counting the variations. Because I think they, one of the paintings they used for the entire European tour a few years ago. So there's, I don't know how many posters that was, but the unique paintings, I think I'd have to count them, maybe 10.
That's awesome. Yeah, you're like one of the popular poster artists for them on the Facebook groups and all the Tool poster collectors. And
to be fair, also, I think part of it is that Adam asks and I deliver, because I think I'm a bit more professional than some of the, like, other people that, because I know, I don't know who or whatever, but I know that like some people have been asked to contribute and they wanted to and then wouldn't come through and stuff. And I think just my experience with, being a commercial artist and deadlines and everything, and then obviously they are my favorite band. So, and Adam is a really good friend. So if he asks, I try to come through. So part of it is probably that. And then,
you're reliable. And that's what I got from all those years working in effects. It's like, you have to work in a deadline and it just becomes part of your work ethic,
Yeah, I mean, there was a poster I did. I don't want to actually say which one it is. I'll let people guess. But Adam was like, "Oh, we need a poster. Can you do it?" And I was flying out within 48 hours to go to Atlanta, and I was like, "Oh shit, okay." So I did a poster in about a day.
Wow.
And usually, the last one I did just for this tour, took about, I don't know, maybe a week. So that's my kind of usual time. But that one I did in a day, and it's been a pretty popular poster.
Yeah. You know how it is. It's like sometimes those quick ones end up being super popular. It's funny.
I actually, because I've done a lot of covers for Marvel, and I actually get really angry. I don't do that kind of stuff anymore, but in the past, it would be like a really tight deadline, and I would have to rush and do a cover in a night. And then, I'm like, okay, fine, I finished it or whatever. And then that cover would become more popular than the ones that I really like. And I'm like, what the hell? And it really actually made me angry because I didn't consider it good work. I considered it just had to be done, but suddenly it's more popular than what I do consider good work.
It happens all the time, man. I think there's something to be said about like immediacy and not overthinking your choices and just going for it. There's something to be said about that. And then the bad thing about doing that as well is you become the guy that can do a painting overnight, and then they expect you to do that all the time. We were just talking, I forget, I don't remember which guest, but we were just talking about that recently, that you don't want to get in that position to where you're the fast guy that always has to do it overnight.
I actually warn a lot of my friends who, not anymore because we're all now, seasoned and old. But in the past, people would like start working for comic book companies and then like, I did a whole issue in 10 days, which is 22 pages, and I'm like, be careful, because they'll you'll be that guy, and then you'll burn out and the work will suffer, and then they'll be like, well, his stuff isn't selling, and then they'll let you go, not take it, because they won't think, wait, his stuff isn't selling because we're making him do it so fast, so he has to do it to a crappy, instead, because that Iron Man book I did, it was meant to be an issue every month, but instead it was 6 issues in a year and a half. But today nobody remembers that.
Right, exactly.
At the time people were bitching and complaining and all of that, but if I did it crappily, nobody would remember. There would be no Iron Man movie, there would be no everything we know today. And now when people, everybody's like, oh, I love that book, I grew up on that book and stuff. Nobody remembers that it was late. They only remember the quality.
Yep, exactly. And anytime anyone wants to bitch again, you just hold that up as an example.
Sadly, people have very short memories.
Yeah. I got to say one last thing before we go is I'm guessing your foundation, foundation for your paintings is based on drawing. You seem like because it's like your quality, you can tell someone that's a good draftsman or draftsperson or whatever, someone that draws really well. It's like it translates in the painting. My friend Travis Louie, he would always tell me that he was a great painter. He's like painting is drawing. You know, it's like you got to know how to draw to paint.
Yeah,
I think.
I maybe it's because I grew up on comic books, not American comics, but like European comic books. So drawing was like the thing I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Painting came later, but my painting just became a way to color the drawings.
Right. Exactly. I could totally see that.
And then, at some point, the kind of, I still do the drawing very, very tightly. And I still, in all of my paintings, you can still see the drawing coming through. It's just that I've, at some point, learned to let go of some of the constraints of the drawing and let the painting breathe more. Because I felt for most of my career, the painting was very much held back by the drawing. So the drawing was
I know what you mean.
But in my more recent work, I'm kind of letting them coexist and using or trying to use the best of both. Which in the past, so in the past, if the drawing had a mistake, that mistake would stay in the painting. But now I've let go of that, and I'm like, well, no, I'll just overpaint. I'll paint over it and fix it because it'll make a better piece.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Your remarks are really amazing too. It's like I saw the other day. I saw you did a Bride of Frankenstein remark on one of the posters. I was like, how the hell did he do that? It's like, how did you do that? Because I know how it is doing those remarks. It's like you can't like trace it out, or it's very weird because the posters, you can't, especially if you're not going beyond the border of the image, you have to you can't fuck it up. You can't paint over it and fix it. You know what I mean? So I was like wondering how I saw that, and I was like, how did he do that?
And this is actually, I mean, the acrylic, the way I use it, especially on the posters, I find it really quite relaxing because I just block it out in mid gray, and then I just go back and forth, push it around, black, white, or the range, so I can actually massage it literally until it's
right. So you just you don't go outside of the bounds, the edges, unless you go a little bit more if you need to make it bigger on the edges or something.
Yeah, with that Bride of Frankenstein, I had to actually, I realized I made her neck too thin, and I actually painted out of that original kind of gray. But I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those things. I've become obsessed, I would say, for the past 7 or 8 years with Baroque and kind of like classical, but especially Baroque statues, because it's that when they moved from like the Renaissance, where it was all relaxed and floaty, and moved into more that kind of tense bodies and real chiseled kind of almost. So I now, when I draw or paint, I always think of like, okay, I literally want to draw a Baroque type of statue. So that really kind of has reset my mind to thinking of things in these volumes.
Right.
Because before I always thought of the line first, but now I think of the volume. And then the line just describes that volume to give me a guide, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So even when because I now often sketch digitally before I commit to paper, and I have like a brush, I've switched actually from Photoshop to Paint Studio.
Oh, really?
Studio Paint, but I have it's like a ink brush type of thing, and it literally kind of replicates like drawing with a Bic ballpoint pen.
Oh, cool.
And then I can really carve the shapes.
Yeah.
And it really gives me like I don't know, maybe I'm fooling myself, but it seems to really work quite well. These kind of like really, hopefully powerful shapes. So they're like Bride of Frankenstein. To be fair, she did turn out really well.
Yeah, I know. I was impressed.
They not all of them turn out that way, but that one really did turn out quite well.
Yeah, we don't always post the ones that don't turn out so well.
Yeah, I this is also why, like with the tool posters, I try not to take pre-orders, because I don't want anybody who pays for something in advance to then be disappointed.
Right. Yeah.
So I would rather just do it when I have the time, and then put it out there. And if somebody likes it, they will take it, rather than, So I learned this through, comic work, because commissions, especially like at conventions, and then also at home commissions, are like a really big thing. And I just really dislike that moment of like when you realize that the person who commissioned it, maybe it's not quite what they had in mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
It adds that level, another level of pressure.
He's a really good friend of mine, but he had a kid, or has a kid, but the kid is now, God, how old is he now? 16, 17. But when he was 2, he asked me to do a drawing of him. I did a drawing that I thought was really, really good. He was like, oh, it doesn't look anything like him. He was really quite like down on it. And then about a year later, he's like, oh, he's grown into his portrait. Now it looks exactly like him. And I was like, it always looked like him. It's just that in a drawing, obviously, for whatever reason.
Yeah, you couldn't see it.
Yeah, but he's like, oh, now like at 3, he looks just like him. I'm like, it always looked like him.
That's hilarious. Have you ever sculpted?
A long time ago, like a long time ago.
It's so fun. You should try it. It's super fun.
I loved it in school.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, because I had an entrance exam for that art school in Bosnia, and part of it was drawing and then sculpting, and I was decent enough even as a teenager.
Yeah, I bet you would just if you did it now, you just with all of your knowledge, you'd just be able to sculpt really well right off the bat.
And I learned Zbrush last year, and I actually find it really, really fun.
Yeah, it's super fun.
And the results I achieved, I'm really happy with. So it is. I think it is something that I could do fairly competently.
I'm sure you could
see things in 3-dimensional.
Yeah. So, the funny thing as a traditional sculptor who's also used Zbrush before, Zbrush makes you a better sculptor.
Oh, does it?
Yeah, it's weird. It's like I've seen people who aren't I've seen people do Zbrush, and I'm like, that person can't sculpt that well. I know their work. It's like I don't know what it is. It's like it's somehow I don't know how to describe it, but it's like it gives you some kind of edge somehow, and it makes you like you have to know you have to know how to sculpt and how things look in 3D. It's not like it just makes anybody a good sculptor, but it makes you like a little bit better than you are in traditional sculpting, clay sculpting, I think. Yeah,
I could see that as well. I think I would say the same applies to painting, because the digital kind of removes that the tactile feel of the real materials.
Right.
And you have to have a bit of it's like an instinctive feel for it. I think.
Right.
So maybe it's that. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing, but I have to say, actually, learning Zbrush actually made me a better painter, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of gave me even more that whole kind of volume.
Yeah. yeah, I always credit being able to paint, because I didn't start painting fine art stuff until I was 33. So I was already in the business of being pretty much mostly a sculptor for like, 10, 15 years, or I don't know, 13 years or something.
Yeah,
And I really credit uh knowing form and constantly looking at forms in 3D and looking at life casts and body casts using reference, just living in the kind of the three-dimensional world and approaching artwork that way to how I'm able to capture form in painting just from staring at it and studying it and knowing how to do it three-dimensionally.
Oh, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. So it was like kind of good training for being a painter, I think.
I think anything in life, if you live with it, it seeps into you. And
right.
I mean, I know, just it's like with driving, you longer you do it, more it kind of feels just like you can feel the weight building in the car if you go into various different things, but it kind of translates into everything else. So it makes perfect sense if you're doing sculpture and thinking about the three-dimensional, that it would, because I think that's what it did to me. Learning Zbrush, it really improved my kind of the way I was looking at my 2D
right
work.
Yeah, being able to see things from all sides is like is huge, because as painters we're just like kind of cheating or creating the illusion of 3 dimensions on a flat panel.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I could keep talking all night to you, but I know it's late where you are. I've already kept you beyond what I said I would. And
that's all right.
But man, I really appreciate it. It was so great to meet you finally. I've been a fan
me too.
For a long time. And
Same.
I love everything you do. It's amazing. I'm so honored that you tell your story here and stuff. People are going to dig this episode. So very appreciative.
Well, hopefully, we'll meet in person soon.
Yeah.
This nonsense has to be over soon.
It's got to be over soon. It's got to be over soon. Well, if you ever come out to LA, man, I'd love to.
I mean, I'm there yearly in normal times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're planning actually in San Diego Comic-Con this year.
Oh, cool.
So that's
in the summer, right?
Yeah, July.
Yeah.
So then we're in LA usually after that for a few days at least.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it'd be great to meet up. I'd love to.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back to kind of, back on the road a bit.
Yeah.
Because at least you guys in the US, you have a big country, but here, in England, it's not that far anywhere.
Right. That's true. It is really small. Well, all right then. Well, again, thank you. Thanks for coming on. And as we do always at the end of the podcast, you have to say goodbye, audience. So say goodbye, audience.
Goodbye, audience.